Newman Brothers were originally brass founders established in 1882 by two brothers, Alfred and Edwin Newman. As brass founders, their business was based on casting an assortment of metal articles, in this case largely cabinet furniture, from molten brass. By 1894, they had moved their business to new premises at 1315 Fleet Street in the Jewelry Quarter. This move also spelled a slight change in their production line. They were now listed as coffin furniture manufacturers and specialized in the production of general brass furniture. The business was run by the Newman family until 1952, and the company was dissolved in 1999. Owen was our tour guide around the Coffin Works for the event. It was hilarious and I had a very good time.
So if we were to continue to walk on, we'd get to Brindley Place.
Okay. Would you swim in there?
Would I swim in there? No. I've fallen in several times.
Really?
Yeah.
How? Were you drunk?
No. One time I jumped off the boat, caught my foot between the concrete and the side of the canal,
Yeah.
and twisted my ankle. And about half an hour later, I fainted on the back of the boat and fell off.
Oh my
Woke
god.
up underwater.
So I'm going to do a tour. What's your name again?
John
John.
Wilson.
John Wilson. Okay.
You can find me on Instagram as Tugs Photos. Tugs Photos.
Okay. And you, so all your pictures are on there.
I got some
I
pictures
love
on
them.
there.
So all you do is you do it for fun. You don't get paid.
I
for your
don't get paid.
photography.
I used to do performance photography in London. I didn't get
Yeah.
paid for that either, but that was quite fun.
Okay.
Mostly cabareting, making gay bars.
Oh shit. No battery.
Hello, nice
Hello.
to meet you. Just for you. We've got some prosecco waiting for you.
Yes, that's the sole purpose of my visit.
Well, we might be able to rustle up 2 glasses then in that case. So if you'd like to make your way up the stairs, follow Owen.
Hello.
I think they've been on the percent.
Susie's just high on live.
Thank you.
This is one of the attendants. It's their get to know each other party thing. That sounds a bit dodgy, doesn't it? So these items were made down in the stamp room, and we'll do some demonstrating machinery down there as well. Next door to that, the room furthest away on the ground floor, that's the polishing shop. You've actually got a casket and a coffin. So the American caskets are rectangular in shape. This is why you can have one metal bar to attach the 3 handles. The English coffins are 6 or 8 sided for the shoulders, and it tapers. It's the sign of the cross instead there. So that's why you have either 6 or 8 handles separately instead there. So that's the difference. So that's where they produced it there to get put together. Then they come across to this side of the factory.
These tools are something you do regularly then?
So the night, actually I only found out about doing this myself last week. Alright. So usually so usually I'm here today.
Next week,
It's good fun.
Hello.
Oh, that's cool.
Hello.
Howdy, partner. It's a snake in my boot.
This originally was a storeroom for the metals. That's why the floor is quite uneven for the metal there. But we'll carry on through.
There's never been no Redway scouting patch.
That's where I belong. So welcome then, welcome to the stamp room. I think this is probably one of my favourite rooms anyway. But originally, just shut the door. So originally the stamp room, this hasn't really changed at all. You've got the electric light, that's fairly new. And that cupboard at the end, that black cupboard, that was added by the last drop stamper in 1999. Apart from that, the machinery, all added in 1894. I think we've got bigger drop stamps than the Museum of the Jewellery Quarter. Yeah. Back in the 60s, obviously fair pay. Men could earn up to around £25 a week. Ladies could earn up to £5 a week back then. But apparently the men were doing the harder work anyway, they say. But actually the drop stamps themselves, the smallest is this one, and this is the one we'll demonstrate in a moment. But this is £100 iron weight, 200, 300 and 400 pounds. The first one is making little RIP tags. That's what we'll make tonight as well. It sounds weird saying tonight, but this is a two-man operation, much lower than the ground level because of the weight of it. And this is making the breastplates for the names and the dates. So you've got the breastplate on the top there. This one is £600 to £700. And when it drops, you can hear it a quarter of a mile away. So the reason for that, you'd only hear this once, because they're on piecework, making as many items as you can, you'd only hear this one once every 5 seconds. But as I said, they never compromise, so that's why all of these machines were used from 1894 when they opened to 1999 when they closed, and we can still use them for demonstrating as well there.
Just look at that, they're on the friction thing, aren't they? So you put the friction on to fix it up.
That's why you're
Now get down in the pit. The drop stampers were down in the pit, so they were eye height, so you could see what they were doing. Also, they were foot stamping. So the idea is you had your foot in the noose, you had your hands free then. So you'd have the foot in the noose, you'd put the metal in with one hand, kick the rope to drop the weight, flick it to lift it back up, and then the other hand to take the metal out while you're putting the next piece in. So it was in, kick, flick, out, in, kick, flick, out, in, kick, flick, out. So you could always tell a drop stamper in the jewellery quarter. They had the muscles on one leg much larger and more developed than the other side. So they walked with the drop stamper's limbs. The ladies on the fly presses were throwing the handles, pulling them back from 7 till 7 every day. So they developed the muscles in one arm. And that was the fly presser's arm as well there. So you could always tell the difference between the people. But I'll get the goggles on. You'll hear the squeak as well. So that's quite quiet, that one anyway. But, there we go, a few pieces. So every 2 seconds you hear this. So that was every 2 seconds, every 5 seconds, that one. So a lot of people went deaf in here. Also, you missed a drop, you lost a finger or two. And when Newman Brothers first opened, they had children working here, taking the items from here to the ladies on the fly press. If they missed a drop, lost a whole hand as well. And well, not unfortunate, sounds quite good actually, but on your 15-minute break, there was a pub next door called the Chapel Inn. So you'd nip over, have a few pints, get back to work, then that's when you lost another finger or two instead. But I'll pick these up while we're here. And we've got our little RIP tags. So these are tiny items, they just go on to the coffin handle, so all that work just for these. There is a little bump, and that registers on the fly press, so the ladies can put them in first time and press them out.
In the right
That's it, exactly. And they always joke, they always said RIP, return impossible at Newman Brothers. There we go. But actually by the 70s they were painting these, so you could have these in red or purple instead for the respect. But while we're here, I'll demonstrate that one over there. He was the highest paid at the factory, and he specialised in breastplates as well. He was here till the end. But a lot of workers were here parents, grandparents as well. When we go back upstairs, I'll tell you about Dolly Dunsby. She was here for 60 years, didn't like retirement at 75, so she came back and she was here into her 80s as well. But she died in 2000 at the age of 100.5 instead. So she's quite a character as well. But while we're here, this is the fly press. So this is the ladies' domain, probably a little bit shorter than me, because if you get hit by that, it's game over. That's why extra hairspray should be all right tonight. And the idea is
a safety gown.
Exactly, forget it. It's a safety gown and hairspray. That's all you need. So the idea is, it's called a fly press because this is just flying round. You'd never hold it; you'd throw it instead. Health and safety, we can't do that anymore. But the idea is, you throw the handle. Oh, we've got some scrap metal in from the last one. Take that out. There we go. So you put your piece in with that little bump. Bring the handle round. And it should drop into the tray below. So from there, you'd throw the handle away, take out the scrap metal.
Very smoothly.
Not really. And as you can see, it's a dangerous operation. Yeah. But you put the next piece. The trouble is, they've had this redone because it wasn't in the best position. So you put the next piece in as the handle's coming back round, and then it drops in. Obviously, if you are too slow, miss fingertips, you lose fingertips instead. So you are able to be a bit quicker. We'll just do the next one like that. And they drop into the tray below. So from there, you've got a tray of RIP tags. They go upstairs and they go onto the coffin handles to be prepared. Then they go across to the workshops at the front, and that's where they're picked and packed instead. It's the stairs that occur, especially when you do that 2 or 3 times a day as well. But welcome to the warehouse. So this is the ladies' department at the factory. This room would have had about 15 ladies in altogether. And again, everything was left when they closed. Apart from the tables in the middle, they've been rejigged because of COVID and walkways and things like that. But more or less, the tables here, everything was just left. The boxes all around the room, you've got York creme handles, new creme handles, they're all full. They're all one set in one box instead. And then you've even got orders that were waiting to go out when the factory closed, but they were never picked up. So they're all the orders as well, just there. So it is a bit like the Mary Celeste, everything was just left. But the room itself, this is where they picked and packed the items. On the table here, feel free to handle and get a feel for them. I know most of them are backed as well. But you can see items that Newman Brothers made. You've got the cast handles, the brass handles, the plastic handles. You've got the wooden handles they bought in later on as well. You've also got the casket handle here. So this is the full casket handle. The metal tube made around the corner by Mr. Jones. But again, everything was left. So you've got the boxes that are waiting to go. You've got the labels, the York creme handles as well. Underneath the table, you've got boxes full of coffin handles. We've got 20,000 coffin handles, and all of them have got 3 numbers. They've got their original register number, they've got a Birmingham Conservation Trust number, and they've got an Advantage West Midlands number as well. So they've all been catalogued. I don't know who's going to count them. In like next year, somebody's going to go through and say, "Oh no, we've only got 19,000."
They haven't told you, have they?
Exactly. That's it. Somebody's actually going to do it now. Say, "Oh, we've got 19,998 or something like that." But yeah. So they used to play music later on up here, but they always said this was the saddest occasion when they were making the children's furniture. This is taking a dark turn, this tour, hasn't it? Especially as it's getting darker as well. Oh, and I forgot to start with Dolly Dunsby. So Dolly Dunsby started here when she was 15, and this is the woman that had tried her hand in every department for 30 years. Then when she turned 30, the floor manager job, after 30 years even, the floor manager job came up on this floor. They were going to offer it to somebody else. So she said, "Hang on, I've been here the longest, that's my job." So they gave her the job. So for 30 years, she was floor manager of this floor, but she retired at 75, didn't like retirement, came back. And as I say, she was here into her mid-80s, but she died at the age of 100.5 in 2000, and they looked after her. For her 21st birthday, they offered to buy her a present. She could have anything she wanted. The only thing she wanted was a handmade shroud in lilac from upstairs. So it was stored at the factory until it closed, and then when she died, she was buried in that shroud as well. For her 80th birthday, the Newman Brothers offered to send her on holiday anywhere she wanted to go. She wanted to go to Scotland, and she wanted to take her brother, Charles, that had never been. He never worked at Newman Brothers, but they paid for both of them to go as well. Gave them £25 spending money each as well. And the best story, her family came back when we first opened, and they didn't know what to get her for her 99th birthday. So they looked around the factory, looked around the house even, and she hadn't got a refrigerator. So they bought a refrigerator, filled it full of food. A week later, they went back, it was switched off, it was empty. And they asked her what had happened. She said it was so nice that she didn't want to get it dirty. So she cleaned it, emptied it, and switched it off instead there. But we'll go into the office, do a bit more talking. And actually, as you come through, look at the door handle just on the front. The factory, when it was going into decline, they just replaced it. So the door handle fell off in the 50s. They replaced it with a casket handle instead there. The railings to go up and down the stairs, they were the metal tubes for casket handles. But in the days of health and safety, you had to take them down instead. But come in, please, come in. The only difference about this room, this didn't exist. This little barrier, this was done for when we reopened with COVID and everything. Not with COVID, we weren't giving it to people or anything like that. But this is the original main office. So when we started, you went into next door, that was the secretary's office. So the idea is you'd come up the main stairs, see the secretary, and if you were a highly thought of undertaker, you'd be invited into the main office instead then. And you'd come and meet the Newman brothers, or the later Newman brothers, or Joyce Green instead. So I can actually show you, had originally Edwin and Alfred, then Alfred a sole trader, and then his two sons, Horace and George, and they're just up on the walls behind you instead. So this Victorian looking gentleman is Alfred Horace Newman, like his father, and the gentleman with the glasses is George Newman. He was the most charismatic of the two. Apparently you could chat to him more, but he'd only give you 5 minutes of his time. So if you were in the middle of a conversation, he'd be off, even if you were halfway through it. He actually died in 1944. All of his shares went to his brother, and his brother ran the factory like a very Victorian factory up until his death in 1952, and that's when the shares were dispersed then. And that picture looks like he's never smiled a day in his life. No. But that picture was also taken for the 1950 Funeral Director's Journal, so I think I'd be a bit worried if he had a big grin on his face in there. But the room itself, nothing's really changed since Joyce. So actually on the desk here, you've still got Joyce's glasses, her work glasses. You've got her work shoes under the desk as well. You've got bits and pieces writing, this is all her writing on the side there. You've got essence of peppermint, you've got the Dewitt's jug, you've got the first aid jug there, you've got random little pint glass as well. So again, it was all just left when the factory closed. My favourite one is this one here. And you've got beer, champagne, sherry. The sherry's the only one that's been opened. Wasn't me, I promise. And then cigars as well, just there for prospective clients. So again, they were just left.
Joyce looks like she smokes a cigar.
She does, that's right. She looks quite manly. That's the thing. And actually, they used to call her Mrs. Marks and Spencer's because she always wore the same black outfit to work with one string of pearls as well. Weirdly, she is still here. I swear this to this day, because she died in 2009. But I was here on the day we first opened. I was the first person in, nobody in the factory. And I always walk in and knock on that door now. Because I walked in without knocking, and somebody right in my ear, they went, hello, as if I'd interrupted them. And they did interviews with her before she passed away, videos as well, so you could, and it was her voice, definitely. So every time I come in now, I have to knock just to make sure. So she said, so I shouldn't be really coming manly while I'm in here. That's why I'm still whispering anyway. But she's a brilliant character anyway, because as I say, she started in 1949, worked her way up to become director, and then took over complete control of the factory. And she was revolutionary. She bought one of the first answer machines into Birmingham, and that was installed here. She also bought bigger windows. Well, we can't quite see them at the minute, but they're bigger windows. They open as well. So one of the ladies that worked here in the 70s used to smoke. She used to open the window so she could smoke out the window. And the one day she saw a line of 3 hearses parked up outside because the undertakers used to bring their hearses with a coffin to collect the items. A car came screeching around the corner onto Fleet Street, slammed on his brakes, took his hat off, reversed all the way back up because he thought there was a major funeral with 3 hearses and the coffins waiting outside as well.
Just using them as trade ones.
Just using that, exactly, that's just loading them up with the handles, probably stood on the street chucking them all in, that sort of thing there. So yeah, so we've got the bigger windows, that was Joyce that brought them in. Not literally, even though I think she could, looking at that. But she's a brilliant character. As I say, she always wanted this to be a museum. And she died in 2009, but we opened in 2014. As I say, she also, because they closed in 1999, she used to come in every day, sit in the office with her crossword puzzle, her mobile phone, and she just guarded the cigar in hand, e-bag on. And she used to look after the office. She looked after the factory, because next door was an almost identical factory to this, and now it's the Mitchell and Butler, the brewers, it's their head office. They used to make door handles next door, and in 2000 they demolished the building, nothing to protect it. So she would just come and guard the building and protect the stock as well, because she could have sold off a lot of that for scrap metal anyway. And in 2003 she sold the building with its contents to Advantage West Midlands. She had the lot valued at just over £1 million. She sold it for 400,000 on the proviso that they opened it as a museum, but they lost their funding in 2010 and they sold it to Birmingham Conservation Trust for 65,000, and that's when it took them 4 years to photograph everything, took it all out to a warehouse, brought it all back once it was catalogued and put them back in their exact positions they were left in as well. So I think she'd be happy to see it as a museum. I think they said it was the coldest room in the factory originally, and this was the Shroud Room. We don't know exactly when they started making shrouds at Newman Brothers, because we know there's an article in the newspaper in 1902 looking for shroud girls for this room. So we think around 1900 they probably started making shrouds. We've got some shrouds on display over there. They were actually made by volunteers here, and they're the Edwardian style of shrouds, but they're full shrouds instead. Newman Brothers actually started going into making their own version of shrouds, which is literally just the front, but these were the full original shrouds here. As I said, the replicas there. And this room, about 15 ladies, they could make between 12 and 15 shrouds in an 8-hour shift instead of here. But this was done per shroud. So it was a bit like piecework, but it was per shroud instead. So the room itself hasn't really changed. Again, you've got that glass at the bottom so you couldn't look out, so you had to keep working. Also, as well, this end of the room, we've got the top of the hoist. So this is the one that goes right down to the ground floor to get the items out. Originally, it was all open. Health and safety, they had to cover them up instead. By the 1970s and 80s, they used to have big Christmas parties here. And the ladies with children in prams used to hoist them up using the hoist. Health and safety would have loved it back then. Actually, the funny thing is as well, they used to keep the children locked in the office while the parents were having the party outside. So apparently, if you rang up for a late order and emergency order for coffin handles, a 5-year-old would probably answer the phone, and he'd be taking the orders as well, because they were in the office. But also here you've got the crimper, and the crimper does the linings for the insides of the coffins instead. This is a 2-person operation, so one for the handle, one to feed the material through. Then you unbolt it and change the blade instead there. I always say, you know these big houses, when they do their list of most important objects you get out in case there's a fire? If that's the top of the list, I'm not getting that out. That can burn, I think, instead there. And then again, it's a wooden floor, it probably just falls straight through. I don't know why I'm talking about this. I'm causing something here, aren't I there? But also as well, over in the corner, you've got the coffin, and this was donated. This is a fairly new coffin. And nowadays you can have anything on your coffin. It's like it's shrink wrapped. So you can have skylines of Birmingham, you can have family photos on them. This has got little bits of history for Newman Brothers instead. I've decided, actually we'll go over to a closer look as well. I've decided, this is my sense of humour, but I've decided I want a full image of me on the top, and I'm just going to be there like that, on the top.
As if you're trying to get
Exactly, trying to get out. And then that's when I want the buzzer going knocking on the side instead. But yeah, so we've got some really nice pictures on here as well. If we look on the top, you've got a couple of the booklets, the catalogues. You've got the Japan plate that's downstairs. This is Dolly Dunsby. This was her 80th birthday just here. So in her favourite colour in lilac as well. And Cyril Salt was one of the directors there. Then you've got this room in 1960. I'll show you a bit more about that over there. The cigars as well, and some of the items, some of the rooms. This is Holford Di Davis from downstairs as well, with Dolly. And weirdly, this one was called Molly. So Di Davis with Dolly and Molly just there. And then on the front, you've got Joyce Green, Mrs. Marks and Spencer's just there. And there should be one other room. Where are we? What's that one? I can't remember me myself now. This seems very disrespectful. I'm just lying over the coffin now. But this is the electroplating room that was downstairs as well. But that now is an architect's instead. So that's how the room looked. But it was unsafe because of all the machinery in there instead. But that's one of the coffins. Also, when we first opened, one of our first exhibitions, they were called Crazy Coffins from, I think they were Nottingham. And they make specific coffins. You have to have a double plot when you bury them, but you can be buried in anything. So it was the weirdest thing. This big lorry pulled up, and they pulled out a 7-foot ballet shoe. They pulled out a 6.5-foot canal barge. We had a full-size egg that somebody had ordered to be buried in the fetal position. We had a Rolls Royce as well. And then weirdly, we had this little urn, this little ashes box, and it was a Tesco lorry. because the man that had ordered it had driven for Tesco's for I think 40 years, and he wanted his ashes in this little Tesco's lorry instead. So yeah, so you literally can have anything nowadays to be buried in. As well, the chairs, they're Singer sewing machine chairs, and when they were all in storage, thieves broke in and stole the original chairs, because it turns out the Singer sewing machine chairs are worth more than the Singer sewing machines instead. But again, ladies' department, so when they first opened, you weren't allowed to talk to each other, you couldn't look out of the windows, and originally it was all gas lighting as well, so you've got the gas pipes above there as well. And then again, you've got orders for the shrouds all made up that never went out, you've got rolls of material as well, just there. If we come just a little bit further up to this table here, we've got a few items. Feel free to handle these ones up.
I always like the garments that taste forgotten.
Oh, definitely. They're very of their time now, these ones. But actually on this table, you've got a full shroud that Newman Brothers would have made. So this is the one without the back, and it's got the sleeves completely separate. So the idea, as I say, you'd lay the shroud over the body, tuck the arms up underneath instead. Originally, you could have a shroud in blue or in white. That was your only decision. So Newman Brothers decided you could have a shroud in any colour you wanted. So this is why they started producing swatch books instead. So actually they've been handled quite a lot. So there we go. So you've got the peach for the Indian community, because they said the white doesn't complement the skin, but the peach does. And then, because it's all about show, you have to have the lining for the coffin as well. So you've got that one in peach. Then you've got, for the Catholic community, you've got the little cameo brooch just in the centre just there. And then you've got the lining for that one as well. The next one along, this is actually for workhouses, poor homes, care homes, and this is in felt, because it was a lot cheaper to produce then instead. So you've got the felt version, and then you've also got the lining for that one as well. You had to have the lining for the coffin. But the saddest thing, Newman Brothers produced football colours as well. So you could have Birmingham City, and you can have Aston Villa as well.
Oh, I've seen it all.
And there we go. And there is a company in Coventry still going. They're called Clark and Strong, and they make shrouds. They've been doing it for over 100 years. And they say most people are buried in their own clothes, but the most popular shrouds are still football colours instead. But obviously it depends where you go for those football colours there. So there are 2 football ones there. But also as well, we've got the stories of the ladies up here. And this lady is Sheila Mayer. And Sheila Mayer, she actually was pregnant when she worked here. But she's a brilliant character because she was pregnant and she was about to get married. So she couldn't afford a wedding dress. So she used to acquire some of the rolls of material, wrap round her bum, and she made her own wedding dress. So she claims to be the only woman married in a shroud anywhere there. And then there's another lady as well. She had a brilliant story. She used to take meet boyfriends, and they always used to ask her what she did. And she would never tell them. And eventually one got right round her and she said, well, I make clothes. And he said, well, what sort of clothes? And she had to think, and she thought, I make clothes to die for. And that's where that little saying is there that she came up with. But the ladies, they always had a good time of it. They used to have music playing and things like that. The only problem was it was the coldest room in the factory. So that's why we have got that massive, huge fire over there that clearly heats the whole room. And on their 15-minute breaks, they'd nip over, stand like Victorian gentlemen trying to get warm, and then go back to work after the 15 minutes. The other special thing about this room, though, is you've got the tea station as well. In 1960, there was a strike over tea. The ladies on this floor with Mrs. Overton in charge, the ladies downstairs with Dolly Dunsby in charge, got together. Mr. Floyd and Mr. Kellett wanted to cut the 2 breaks down to from 15 to 10 minutes. So they called a strike. They were out for 4 days, no shrouds being made, no orders being picked or packed downstairs. So Mr. Floyd and Kellett had to visit Mrs. Overton, who lived closest to the factory, begged her to come back to work. They said, you can have anything, what do you want? They said, we want our 15-minute tea breaks. Number one as well, if you wanted to go to the loo from here, you had to go all the way down, across the courtyard, up over the gas engine on the other side of the courtyard anyway. And she also said we want a tea station installed so we can make our own tea. So that's where the tea station comes from. It's brilliant because you've still got, there's a half bottle of Worcestershire sauce, the knives, the forks, the cutlery, and the list hanging up on the wall is the list of all the ladies on this floor, if they like milk, if they like tea or coffee, if they like milk, and how many sugars as well. And I think there's just enough room to add Owen at the bottom and gin and tonic. That's how we put there. But the other thing to mention as well is you've got the little cooker. They installed the cooker as well, and the men down in the stamp room, they made the ladies a toasting fork, so they could have toasted tea cakes as well up here. But also you've got the cooker, you've got the little fire, and that's our little tea station. But also while we're here, have a look round while you're up here, because on this table here you've got all of the measurements for the lapels and the materials. On the back you've got the rolls of materials, they're from the 80s and the 90s. There is a little bit of damp on the back wall, so they're trying to preserve them up there. And the weird thing is you've got this window here. When we open as a museum, they put the lift in for the disabled, so that's why it's been boarded up. But that would have been looking out onto the courtyard originally instead of just there. Somebody, it was a mother and daughter, they were Chinese. And I started talking about the coffins, and we never made coffins, that sort of thing. And the mother, she looked shocked, she stood there going, and I said, "Oh, is everything okay?" And she said, "No, I thought this was a coffee factory." So it was a bit different, coffee to coffins instead. But yes, but what we'll do then, if you're ready, we'll make our way right down to the ground. There is the little shop. If you wanted to look in the shop, there's like guidebooks, there's little bits and pieces, and we'll end down there. So if you'd like to follow me.
So you'd have a card, and when you arrived at work, you put your card in there and push that down, and it will put the time on it.
Okay.
And when you clocked out, you move that to the other side, put your card in, push that down, it would record the time that you left.
Should we see where it is in relation to it? I'm just going to find it. Excuse me, ladies.
The ladies, we've got the.
Far as in Baines.
Yeah, they're just through there, so I've been doing well today.
And that
Just
would be the
straight
card that
through.
you
There's the
use.
disabled,
Oh.
the ladies are on the side.
Okay.
And the gents are back
Have you
upstairs.
tried it?
Just use
Are
the
you-
disabled if you want it.
No ink.
Okay, no ink. Okay. So that's it.
Yes,